Ladies and gentlemen, Hebrews and Shebrews, welcome to the Life Podcast, where we inspire you to thrive as peculiar people in a modern world. And today we're doing that by talking to Bryan Williams. We're going to talk to him all about the Hebrew version of the New Testament that he is translating with his colleague Janice Baca. They have done the book of Revelation, and they've done the book of Matthew, and they're working now. I think they maybe have done the book of James too. So they keep going. They're going to do the whole thing, and he releases all of his work for free online. Hey guys, I did more research after this interview into this manuscript, and I just want to give you the notes that I wasn't able to ask Bryan before. So Bryan and Janice are studying, and they are translating this manuscript from Hebrew into English, and they think that it comes from a 1st-century earlier version. Like this, everyone believes that it was an 18th century copy. They think it was just copied from a 1st-century Hebrew manuscript. Okay. But what I didn't know before this was that Cambridge and all of the other researchers who looked at this manuscript before noticed things in the writing in the margins, polemic writing, anti-Christian writing in the margins. Things like calling Yeshua the unholy one. Things like calling Luke evil, and there's even a note that says, I never would have written this, or I never would have copied or translated. That word could be either one. This, if it weren't to fight against it. And may the real Messiah come. We can't wait till the real Messiah comes, like referring to some being other than Yeshua. So it's evident that the people or peoples who made this manuscript did not believe what it said. They were using it to study and fight against Christianity. Okay, that's important to know, I think. Now, why is that important? Because if there already were an ancient Hebrew manuscript, like before this, that he was copying, why did he have to make a copy into Hebrew then? He already had one. He could have just studied that one and used that to fight against Christianity. So that's one question, and maybe one of the questions that academics thought when they threw all this out. But, Bryan Williams and Janice Baca may have a point in just thinking that he's saying he made a copy from an older Hebrew manuscript, and it's possible. It's also possible that this is just a copy of the Greek that everyone has, and it was used to fight against Christianity and be able to study more in depth in a native tongue. You'll have to decide what you think, and you'll have to hear the evidence that Bryan puts forth. I'll ask him this question directly offline and see if he can give an updated answer, and I'll put that in the description. Have you ever wanted to have a Torah observant hero in the shows that you watch? Is that a crazy idea? I don't know, but we're making it at the Life Network. Go to watchthelife.com and find entertainment that you don't have to vet before you show it to your kids. You don't have to cover their eyes before you look at the thumbnails on the site. We're making a bunch of different shows there. Start watching for free and join us. Bryan, welcome to the Life Podcast. Thank you for making the time to be here. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy man.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate coming on. Really excited to be here with you.
Well, someone who visited my Shabbat group she's been coming recently, and she was talking about your work, and she's like, oh, you gotta learn about all the Hebrew manuscript stuff that's going on right now that you guys are working on. And I want to get into that, but I have to hold to my normal rubric and ask you about your testimony, your personal testimony, and how you came into the understanding that the law matters to modern day believers. Can you tell
Sure.
us?
Absolutely. Yeah. So for me, I kind of grew up in a secular home. If you asked us, did we believe in God? I'd be like, yeah, sure. I believe in God. And, do you believe in Jesus? I would say, yeah, I believe in Jesus. But that's about as far as it went. I didn't really know too much. We didn't read the Bible. And every now and then we would pop into like a church, and I would kind of get exposed to that. So kind kind of a worldly mainstream kind of family with a little touchings of Christianity, but for the most part, I didn't really have a walk. I didn't really know much. I didn't read the Bible. I I was kind of living a wild life as a youth. I kind of ran the streets a little bit, hung out with some rough characters, and I played sports. And lucky for me, I was going to go on to college, and I had a roster spot kind of promised for me in baseball. So I went to college, not trying to learn anything, just trying to go continue playing baseball. And things just didn't work out. I got deathly sick right before I was supposed to show up for the first week, and I lost a whole bunch of weight. And then the coach told me to take a year off, and so kind of crushed me. And so I was kind of lost. I was just like, I don't know why I'm here then. I had one purpose. The purpose didn't work out. So I was just kind of went and partied away. Just living up the college life, just doing everything I felt like doing, except for really studying and doing right when I'm in college, even though I'm paying for it. And I reached a point where I got kicked out, and it was not good. I kind of had hit the rock bottom, as a lot of people would say. There was a lot of things. I was broke, had no job, had a drinking habit, and was kicked out of college. Had a back problem at that time. It just you add up all the lists and it's like, wow, I don't think I can go any lower here. But so a friend of mine, he told me, he said, hey, you should write an appeal, try to get back into college. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that was an option. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to pour my heart out in this appeal and see what happens. Maybe what's the worst they can say? No, I'm already kicked out, right? So I wrote this appeal. Yeah, I'm like crying and typing and stuff. And I sent it to them, and lo and behold, they said, okay, we'll give you another chance, but you're getting one semester, and you can't mess this up, because if you mess up, you're going to get kicked out again. So I took that moment as like, wow, this is my redemption moment. I need to figure out this world that I'm living in. I've made a mess of my life, and I know how to destroy my life. Let me do the opposite. I'm really good at messing up my life. So whatever I'm doing now, let me say no to. So like, drinking, parties, people inviting me places. I just said no. And I said, I got to figure out this world. So, it's like Albert Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So I was like, well, then I need to do something different to get a different result. So I said no to everything. And I was a history major at that time, which was like definitely God working, because that's exactly the lens I needed for that moment. And so I said, okay, let me find the truth. I know the truth is out there. Whatever the truth is, I'm going to go for it. But I got to go searching. So I honestly just approached from a historical standpoint, what makes sense? What is real? What lines up with reality? And, I looked at all these religions, and the only one that was historically accurate, matched archaeology, and, people understood it to be true. I said, that's the Bible. Okay, well, let me go get a Bible. So I went home, actually. I had gotten a Bible. Ironically enough, it was on Christmas. It had December 25th on the inside part of the Bible. I thought, that's kind of ironic now looking back at it. But it had dust all over it, like for real dust on the Bible. So I took that back to college, and I literally unplugged my TV, turned off my cell phone, and just sat in my dorm room and read the Bible. And as I'm reading it, things just became like so obvious and so apparent to me. Like it made sense because you read it like a primary source as a person in history, you read it in its culture context, this linguistic context, the time period, and the region, the Middle East, the Eastern mindset. And I started reading. I was like, this is the most amazing book on the planet. Like, how did I not know about this book? This is incredible. And so, I started praying, and I remember the very first prayer, being in that room after having these moments here. I prayed that God would pour on knowledge and information so that I would understand what I'm reading, and that I believed in him and I believed in his son. And this weight came off of me, and it's this joy that kind of poured onto me. And I was so happy, and I had chills, and ever since then, he's just been pouring information and knowledge and stuff onto me. Ever since that moment, I feel like I've been, with my head just barely above the water, and it just keeps rising. So praise God that, he's helping me along the way. But I started reading more, and I'm like, okay, Yeshua is doing Sabbath. Okay, what's the Sabbath? Let me do that too. And so I said to myself, I had this one little saying that I kept saying all the time. It doesn't make sense not to go all the way. Meaning, like, if you firmly believe in something, why would you only execute like half of it? Right? If you firmly believe with all your heart that something is true, you would execute it till its fullest. And so I firmly believed that the Bible was the truth, and it was applicable to my life. So I started using things in it. So like if I had problems lying, I would say, what does the Bible say about lying? And if I had problems with my languages, what does the Bible say about my language? And I would pick these subjects off one at a time, kind of transforming myself, just like building in the knowledge that, hey, the Bible says don't do that, so I'm not going to do that anymore. How practical, right?
That's
So,
great.
so in college, I started doing the Sabbath, and I started eating clean, and I started trying to honor the feast as I knew them at that time by myself alone. And I literally said to myself, if I'm the only person on the planet doing this, then so be it. Because I'm in college. I don't think there was anybody else who was seeing what I was seeing. I was like, okay, I'll just be that loner who's just doing weird stuff. So be it.
So you saw this stuff just from reading the Bible and saying, let's just try and do what it says?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because my life was crashed out, and I hit rock bottom. It was like, what did I have to lose? I had nothing to lose. Let me just let the Bible walk me out. Like, let me follow the Bible to its T and see how my life progresses and changes. And God was really good at like bringing people into my life who had bits of information that I literally was praying for the day before. I mean, stuff like that happened all the time, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. And my life turned around drastically, very fast. And yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's so amazing. If you guys haven't heard of Whole Bible Church or wholebiblecommunity.com, then I'm here to tell you about it. It is a fellowship finder for people in the Torah. It is a feast day finder for people in the Torah. It's a business marketplace. It's all of these things that we had wished existed years ago that now exist because of Matthew Martin of Project E15. He created this whole Bible community, and it's just getting better. I wanted to show you guys kind of like what it's like and explore a little. This is what it looks like when you're looking around on the fellowship finder. There are more than 9,000 people that are signed up. It's growing every day. It's hundreds joining every day. It's crazy. The thing is blowing up. There's a bunch of people in Ohio that I don't know that are Torah observant. There's this business here that I've never heard of, and as I click around and follow through, I see that they make linen dresses for kids. I had no idea. All of this is in my neighborhood. These people are purporting to be Torah observant, and they're making linen clothes, which is a good sign that they are. And I had no idea that they existed. So this is one of the purposes that wholebiblecommunity.com serves. It's to connect you with people who believe the same way you do that you may not even know were out there. Businesses that you may not even know are out there. Like soon there will be a video chat feature, so you could, if you wanted to vet the person, you could vet them right then in a video call. Go to wholebiblecommunity.com and sign up. Add me as a friend. Check it out.
This is,
Yeah.
I know people have come into this understanding of the Bible from many different ways, but it's pretty cool when it's just from reading it and
Yeah.
not having outside influence. It feels like the move of the Spirit now.
Yeah. I get told, like, there's positives and negatives to that, because I would say one positive is I didn't have all this church baggage. I didn't have to unlearn things. So when I read, about the Sabbath, it was like, okay, well, that's the way it is. And so then I would have conversations with mainstream Christians, and they would be like, no, that's not right. And I'd be like, no, but it says right here. Can you read this verse with me? And we would have this back and forth, and I was like, oh, there's something else going on here that I'm not aware of. Like, what is this that when I talk to people who are supposedly living of the book, they have all these difficulties and problems with the text. So I was just like, well, if I'm just the only one, I'll be the only one. So for a very long time, I was just kind of walking by myself, not knowing that there are more people out there who are believing like I was believing.
Wow. Well, what'd you do then? What happened in the rest of your schooling and life?
Well,
How'd you get where you are now?
yeah. So I ended up with a history degree, and I was planning to become a professor. I was going to do history and start in high school and then work my way up. Excuse me. But I got out of, this is how God works. So I got out of college. I graduated with a history degree, and I applied to so many schools. I would say the number was up to probably 300. It was close to that number. And I got 2 callbacks, and I got 1 interview, and they didn't give it to me. And so I was like, what is going on? Is God telling me that I don't need to go this way? I don't need to go this route in a career? So I ended up moving back and getting into a different industry. And I always wondered, like, why did I get a history degree? Why did I study all these things? And then later in life, it all came together, because now I am working with a lot of old manuscripts, and I also teach Torah at a congregation. So I've been teaching for 6 years now. So it's like a full circle. God, gave me that skill set and those tools for later in life, and that happens a lot from what I understand.
Wow, man. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. He guides our lives.
Yeah.
So then tell us about maybe what you work on now, or your how you got into ministry in general, ministry and other work, whatever you want to start
Sure.
with.
Yeah. So I have a ministry. It's called Project Truth Ministries. And this is kind of like, not many people catch this, but it's technically a double entendre. So it's Project Truth. So like it's something you work on. And then Project Truth. So like you work on packaging it, and then you project it out so that people can understand the truth. So it's like a little play there, which is kind of
That's
fun.
cool.
Yeah. But yeah, it started out really to get things out of my head, because I would study these big long things, and I was like, I gotta document this somewhere, so it doesn't take up space. So at the very beginning of it was to document things, but then my my ministry took a different route because of the real Mount Sinai that I got involved with. I was fortunate enough to go to the real Mount Sinai on a trip, and while I was there, I was part of like a documentation process where we were doing 3D scans of carvings out in the desert, and we were documenting with photographs and pin dropping locations.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt
Yes.
you, but can you
Yeah.
explain what you mean by the real Mount Sinai?
Okay. Yeah. So there is a traditional Mount Sinai. The traditional Mount Sinai is still in Egypt. It's what people now call the Mount Sinai Peninsula. That location is credited to be the location based on Constantine's mother. Allegedly, Constantine's mother, the Roman Catholic Church, she went around all these different sites and declared them to be the real locations. The problem with the traditional location is that it's still in Egypt. How can they leave Egypt but also still be in Egypt? So there's a lot of problems with that particular mountain. And also the history of when that his mom, Helen, went around doing these things. It doesn't show up till, I think, 600 years after the fact. So there's some question on whether or not she actually did that, or is there some backdating and just referencing that she did those things to kind of give some credibility to those locations. But at the traditional location, there is no carvings. There's no evidence of a civilization being there at that mountain. So there's no, evidence of like you would see people were living there, rocks put in certain locations like corrals or anything like that. You would see carvings or paintings like in overhangs of rocks. It should be paintings or, people spending time there. Even if you have kids out in the desert, they're going to be, carving on stuff. So, people doodle throughout history. So you should see evidence of people around those locations, and you don't. There's no mass burials at that mountain. There's no color change. And that's kind of a distinct one because Paul mentions that the blackness of the mountain. And you also have people throughout history in the early 1st century, people were talking about the Mount Sinai is the tallest mountain in the land of Midian. But Midian is not in Egypt. So the traditional location is not black. It's not even that tall. You can't even lose somebody. If someone goes to the top of this, you can see them at the top of this location. So there's a lot of problems. A lot of problems with the traditional site. There's also no water in that area as well. But there's a Catholic monastery there, and they claim that that's the real mountain. You could go up there as a whole touristy thing at the traditional location. So it doesn't tick hardly any boxes at all, except for it being in the Middle East, I guess. But yeah, so if you use the Bible to tell you where Mount Sinai is, go figure. Just use the Bible, right? It's kind of what older school archaeologists used to do. They would just open up their Bibles and say, "Well, the Bible says this city is in this area, so go look for it," and then they would find it. So there was like a time period where archaeologists were rejecting the Bible and ignoring it, and just trying to find things, based on how they feel. That I don't know how they were doing it, but there was a time period. But if you were to use the early recordings of historians and stuff, and if you were to use the Bible, you would land in northwest Saudi Arabia. That is where Midian is. The Bible makes it very clear that Mount Sinai is in the land of Midian. And there's actually the Saudi government has done a lot of archaeology showing where Midian is. There's carvings with the name Midian. There's no debate on where Midian is located. So once you go to the land of Midian, which is kind of in and around the area called Al-Bad in Saudi Arabia, some people might be familiar with the term Neom. There's a major project with Neom in Saudi Arabia. But there is a blackened mountain. and it is the tallest mountain in that area, in that region. And that mountain is called Jabal al-Lawz, which means the mountain of almonds. And that kind of brings out the mindset of Aaron, and he had the almond staff. And it's interesting because there is almond trees spaced every now and then on that mountain. So that's also kind of interesting. I've seen them myself. But um, at the base of one of the peaks, there's a peak called Makhla Peak, which is probably an incorrect pronunciation. I don't want to get into that. But Makhla Peak is where there's a lot of archaeology at the base of that peak. And it basically matches what we see in the Bible. It's quite amazing. There is an altar built down at the bottom and has animal chutes. There's pillars, but those pillars might come from a different time period, linking up to Solomon. There's carvings all over the place. There's carvings of Egyptian bulls on this big pile of rocks, which looks to be man-made, piled up like they were making an altar. And even in Google, I think it says Aaron's altar or the golden calf altar. So it very much matches what's depicted in the Exodus story and getting to Mount Sinai. And there's a bunch of other things, like there's a big boulder that sticks up on a hillside about 5 miles, according to the crows fly. It's a little further in the desert. Trying to get there, but there's evidence that rock split and water came out of it and formed a little lake. I mean, it's incredible the amount of evidence that matches up with the Bible and the text. We find ancient Hebrew carvings all over the area. We've even at the split rock, what people believe is split rock, we found the word lechem, which is bread. We find footprints and sandal footprints, and that matches up to some Bible verses as well. So yeah, that is the difference between the traditional location and the what I call, and a lot of people call, the real Mount Sinai. There's a lot of evidence. I mean, we would take up 5 hours me just walking you through the evidence that links that has been discovered. And basically every time we go to Mount Sinai and we look for different areas, we find more evidence. We see more things. We find more paintings, more carvings. It's almost like a treasure hunt, in a sense that we just take people and we say, all right, everybody spread out and try to find things. And then somebody will find something really cool, like a painting or something.
Wow, that's amazing. I can't believe it's not like universally recognized as the real Mount Sinai already. Maybe it is at this point.
It's growing. You'll see it in the news every now and then. You'll see, hey, people are talking about this mountain, and the archaeology, the archaeologists and the scholars are starting to come around. There's just too much evidence. But yeah, so for me, what happened for my case is I had been studying the evidence. I had been studying this mountain and things that people have been finding for a while, but the country was shut off to Western worlds. So I think it wasn't until 2018 did they start letting people into the country from places like the United States. You had to be like a special type of person from a certain country to be able to go in. And people had snuck into the country before, got photos and stuff like that. So there was only just like a little bit of information here and there for a while. And I had tried to go with a particular guy who goes often. I tried to get into the country, and lo and behold, I was 3 days away and COVID struck and shut it all down. And so then it took me 5 more attempts to get over there. But I finally did make it over there. And like I mentioned before, I got to be part of a documenting crew. And we were doing scans and stuff out there in the desert near the Split Rock. And that was really exciting. So then I don't know if you have more questions or anything, but I'm just going to continue
Y-
on with
yes, go ahead. Thanks for
yeah.
telling us about the real Mount Sinai. I had
Yeah.
heard about that a little bit in bits and pieces in the past, but not such a good explanation. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, there's a film called Patterns of Evidence. Tim Mahoney, he put out a three-part series leading up to the to the Mount Sinai, and then when he got to Mount Sinai, he put all the other proposals and played like a skeptic rule. So it really didn't turn out to be like the film that everybody wanted. Um, but yeah, so
Really? So he didn't land on like this is the real Mount Sinai. He's like, then
he
maybe this is.
he
That's what
did.
he.
He said it checked more boxes than the other ones, but it was just like, a lot of people wanted more and he only gave like 10%. And so,
Mm.
um,
No,
so
no, maybe before you
yeah,
go on, one more question. I think a name, Ron Wyatt, it comes to my mind. Did
yeah,
you have any? I'm sure he was probably long gone by the time you started
yeah,
looking into this
he
stuff.
had passed away.
Okay, okay,
However, I did meet some people associated with him. I met, what was called his best friend. He still is in charge of the Museum of Ron Wyatt in Tennessee. I met with him prior to going over there. I was in communications with one of Ron's proteges. That's the person who was my guide the first time I went over there. And
okay.
he was showing me all these places, talking about Ron. So I got to learn all these stories about Ron. Some of them are not public, but I got to understand and know and kind of trace his same footsteps and see the things that he was doing, where he was at. I got to see where he was put into, or he was arrested, and then some of these other places where he was like working with the Saudi government. But yeah, I got to kind of overlap and learn about his story too. It was quite amazing stuff. He was
Was
definitely blessed. Hmm.
did he have to? Was he one? Did he have to break into Saudi Arabia? Like, was this the Wild West days of this thing when he
Yeah,
was?
he snuck in illegally. I think he went over to Egypt, and then from Egypt he went around Eilat, or or got on a boat or something like that. But he snuck in, and yeah, that was a bold move because the Saudi prison is not the place that you want to be. He eventually did get arrested, um, but yeah, he got to find things before everyone else because nobody was looking. Nobody was out there looking at these locations, looking at the evidence. And as he was leaving, the Caldwells, Jim and Penny Caldwell, came through and they got a map from him at a hotel, kind of pointing to where they needed to go. And they were legally allowed to be in the country. So
Uh,
those are kind of some of the early guys who got in there and got footage and was telling people. And then Jim and Penny Caldwell were kind of the first to get, I guess they had the VHS tape video cameras, and they were taking fuzzy photos and stuff like that way back in the day. But they were like the first ones to get the information out to the Western world. But I say that specifically because the people that lived in that region, they all called it Jabal al-Musa, the mountain of Moses. So like they always knew that it was Moses Mountain right there. That's something they grew up with. The people in Saudi Arabia, they had that same understanding. It was just kind of unknown to, I guess, the outside world, or mostly the Western world too.
wow. Thank you. It's great to hear a
Yeah,
little bit of the background of that too.
yeah, yeah. So I was on a documentation, little group. We were taking photos and stuff like that. So I got to know where things were. Uh, and as I came back, I had some overlap with one of the institutes I started working for. We were doing manuscript work for New Testament stuff, and they were doing a big trip out to the real Mount Sinai, and I said, "Hey, I just got back, and I got to be part of this place where we were locating everything, and we were taking photos. So I could be a good liaison and, kind of guide you around where you need to go. And so they recruited me into this expedition they were going to do. They were going to go and search for new things, and they were going to document also, and they were going to do a documentary on some of their findings and stuff like that. So I got recruited into that expedition, and we were going around finding things, and sure enough, we found some really amazing things, some carvings never been documented before. We found some Hebrew lettering and stuff like that, precursors to Hebrew. We found some Proto-Semitic script, which is some of the early Hebrew script. We found a lot of stuff on that expedition, and so building up a reputation, I then got recruited by Living Passages Tours. They give tours to the real Mount Sinai. Some of those famous names like Joel Richardson and Ryan Morrow. I'm not on the website because I have a family. I can't always make tours, but I'm still one of those official tour guides, and I'm still looking for an opportunity here and there that I can take another group out, and we can walk around and we can see all the carvings and also hike the mountain. I also take people up to the peak if they can physically make it. It's a difficult trip to get up to the top, but
You don't
yeah.
need tactical gear or anything, right? It's just quite steep.
No, you don't need tactical gear. I basically explain it to people like, imagine a Stairmaster, and you're going to be on that Stairmaster for at least 4 hours. That's what it's like.
Oh my goodness, poor
Yeah.
Moses.
Yeah. Yeah, and to think Moses did this at 80 years old, that's incredible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the amount of water that I took with me, and then thinking about Moses climbing it, I'm like, yeah, God's gonna have to take care of Moses and give him water and food, because there's no way an 80-year-old guy is gonna, take, a ridiculous amount of water with him to the top of this mountain, because he's gonna be up here for 40 days. So, like, it brings in a new perspective when you think about the mountain and him climbing and the logistics and everything. Yeah, I highly
Wow.
recommend going and see it.
Wow. Okay. I keep
Yeah.
throwing curveballs in the middle of your story, but
That's
I think
okay.
it's help flesh it all out for people.
Yeah. Yeah,
What?
so my project, Truth Ministries, I was blessed with going to Mount Sinai, so I was like, hey, for people who can't make it there, let me just put videos of real Mount Sinai on the YouTube, and so then like people like my grandparents who physically can't travel and can't get there, that they can see the same stuff that we're finding. So then my project, Truth Ministries, started to take a turn to present videos and documents, and we put out photos of carvings and paintings and stuff on that site. So I started putting those out for people, and so then basically my YouTube turned into a passion of two stories. So Mount Sinai, and then the manuscript stuff that I work on, that we kind of created. Yeah, go ahead.
Tell us about the manuscript stuff then. How did you get involved in that? And can you bring us up to speed on what you're up to right now?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. So the so before I made it to Mount Sinai, I had helped out, and a lot of people will recognize this name. I helped out with the finding of the name project that Nehemiah Gordon was in charge of. Nehemiah had this project where he had people scanning through Old Testament Hebrew from around the world, and they were looking for God's holy name with all the vowels present. And I had a friend who was working on that. His name was Cody Thalson, and shout out to Cody. And he said, hey, you can help me out. You can be like my assistant, and we can do this together, since he had already got cleared. So he gave me the Cairo Geniza collection, and I was searching through that and finding God's holy name and passing it back to him. And so I got a little bit of experience working with those manuscripts and looking at the Hebrew. And I started to be a collector. I started, I had read a book about understanding the difficult words of Jesus. And it was a guy by the name of Roy Blizzard. And he said that there was evidence of New Testament Hebrew. And he said, if you take the Greek and translate it back into Hebrew, there's all these rhyming schemes and word puns. And it only makes sense in Hebrew and some of these locations in the Greek if you understand Hebrew. And so he wrote this back in the 80s. And he said people need to go in these libraries and look for manuscripts. And when they start to get digitized, people are going to find them. There's got to be some out there. So Nehemiah started putting out here and there some New Testament Hebrew. So I then became a collector. I was collecting as many as I could find, and I would go into these libraries and look for myself and try to find, is there anything that says New Testament? And I built like this little collection of manuscripts in different libraries, and I would screenshot up and stuff like that. I don't know if that's completely legal with the library, but I was screenshotting them. I wasn't doing anything with them, but I just wanted to look at them for myself. It was just, they were amazing and mind blowing to just have them. And so,
Oh, but sorry,
yeah.
I'm interrupting you again. Now,
Uh,
for anyone who hadn't heard of that name project that Nehemiah Gordon was working on with you and others,
mhm.
can you just give a brief synopsis of that? Like, what was he trying to find, and what were his results? And is it ongoing, or that?
No, I think that project has pretty much been completed, from my understanding. But basically, there's a lot of debate on God's holy name. I don't try to be dogmatic or anything like that. I don't want to, hurt anybody's feelings, but Nehemiah had set out to document all the Hebrew Old Testament manuscripts that contain the missing vowel. So the rabbis and scribes, they're writing God's holy name, and they deliberately pull out the cholam above the vav in God's holy name, so that people wouldn't pronounce it. And they did this based on, it doesn't date very far back. It's like 128 AD. The rabbis had an unfortunate situation where the Roman government was killing people. And so then they got together and said, God's name's too holy and too precious. We can't have everybody dying for saying God's name. So the Pharisees created this kind of ban on God's name. So then the scribes started to remove one of the vowels out of God's holy name, the cholam. And so Nehemiah said, well, that's time stamped, but if there's manuscripts before that, they would contain the missing vowel. And also some of them would know what the name is, and they might slip up. So he wanted to document all the manuscripts that he could find that had the missing vowel, either on one page or on every page. And, people were like, well, there's not many, maybe find one or two. Well, his project grew to the point where he found, I think it was somewhere in the ballpark of 2,400 manuscripts that contained the missing vowel.
And none of the vowels were like just a totally different vowel. They were all
They
pretty much
had,
the same.
those are called scribal mistakes. They did have slight variants. I think Yehovah was one, and Yahovah with two A's was another. But you could see on the same page it would be correct, and then they would have a scribal mistake, and then they would correct again. So,
Okay.
so a lot of those, they kind of sort themselves out as a scribal error.
But the vast majority of it was Jehovah, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And they the Bible says God's holy name, just the Old Testament alone, 6,827 times. So that's kind of a lot. That's a big number. Doesn't seem like God's trying to hide his name, right? He tells us to say blessings and say oaths and vows using his name. And So to me, I've never understood why people took in the tradition to not use this holy name. But yeah, so they found an enormous amount of manuscripts that are Tanakh manuscripts that contain the missing vowel, and that was the finding of the name project that Nehemiah was in charge of.
Thank you for giving us the recap of that, because I think anyone who hasn't heard of it, it would be interested to know what you've been working on there. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Back to what you were talking about.
Yeah. No, that's a good thing to point out. That's very important. But yeah, so I became like a little curator, a collector of New Testament manuscripts. And by the way, there are a lot of New Testament Hebrew manuscripts that contain God's holy name. So I just want to say that with the missing vowel. And when you compare it to the Greek, you're like, oh, the Greek is missing the name spot here. But anyways, so I started collecting.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, we'll get into it a little bit later, but the manuscript that my project focuses on at Project Truth Ministries also does the same thing. It points to God's holy name in the text, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, so I became like a collector. I had, I don't know, maybe 25 different New Testament Hebrew manuscripts, and it was kind of like, I got to catch them all. Like, I got to find all of them. Where are they all hiding?
The Pokemon of
right,
Hebrew.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, kind of that kind of vibe. I was like, I gotta get them all.
like
Where
it.
are they at? So it's like a little treasure hunt for manuscripts, which is very difficult because their websites are all different and hard to navigate. But yeah, so there was a guy that was in charge of a institute, and I had messaged him because he said that they translated a particular manuscript. And I had that manuscript, and it was also paired with another one. That other one was, I think it was Jude. It was a James and Jude. And so I was asking the guy these technical questions about Jude. And I was like, well, this and this word, and and in the process of asking the head guy of this institute, they recruited me in to working with their institute. So I was like, yeah. So I was like, this is crazy. I was like, yeah, I've done a little bit of help on the finding the name project. I was like, yeah, I'll give it a try. What's the worst could happen? They say I'm not skilled enough, and take a hike. I'm like, okay, that was fun while it lasted.
Wow, man, there's a reason that you studied history. I'm seeing it, Bryan.
Yeah, yeah. God knew way in advance what He was going to use me for, and so it kind of all ties in. At the time, you don't know, like, oh, why did that happen? Well, just hold on. God might show you later.
Wow.
So yeah, so I started helping out as a transcriber at this institute, and I did pretty good. I would crank out, looking at the images of the manuscript, and then you would try to figure out the words. Sometimes you have to learn the script, because not all the script looks the same, depending on time period and the scribe writing it. Maybe he writes in like a cursive, loopy way, instead of block lettering, medieval cursive. So you have to learn your alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet. Then you have to learn the one that the manuscript is using, kind of like a code. Figure out, oh, that letter looks like this. So I was doing that at the institute and just cranking out transcriptions of the particular group of manuscripts. And they were like, this guy's really good. He should train all the transcribers that come in. So then I got promoted to being the lead teaching transcriber of the department. And then they put me as like a head of the transcription for a little while. And then they moved me up to an assistant editor. So like I just kept getting promoted. And then I got moved to like the head of the institute's assistant. I was like a double assistant for a little time period, but I was doing like special projects. It's a long story, but I got pulled into I kept getting pulled up for some reason. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. God just keeps blessing me. And I'm not even really doing anything but like doing what they asked.
That's great.
hmm So I was doing that. I worked for the Institute for I think just over 2 years, and we were kind of looking at New Testament manuscript stuff. And unfortunately, the Institute collapsed, and all the board left, and there was this big shakeup. And one of the people that I was assistant to was the lead translator and Hebrew grammarian, Janice Baca. And Janice and I was just like, hey, we would like to continue this work, but the Institute is collapsed. And so how do we resolve this? So we reached out to the head of the Institute, and he said, yeah, I'll give you my blessing. You can go off and work on this. You can take these manuscripts with you and work on them. And we were going to give credit and stuff like that, but the Institute kept collapsing and getting worse. So we started working on this project, and we basically brought it under the umbrella of Project Truth Ministries, and it's our manuscript section of our ministry. And so we started working on this manuscript, and then we were thinking to ourselves, well, we need to have the images. If we're ever going to put this information out, we need to have the images. So we found a guy who was our buddy. His name was Kurt Sutton. And he flew over to Cambridge University, where these manuscripts are, this particular grouping of manuscripts are housed. And he took photos for us. God bless him for doing that. And he had a camera guy with him named Stuart. Shout out to Stuart. But they brought us the manuscript images so that we could be able to use them and to publish them. And we reached out to Cambridge, the head of the department, who was overseeing those manuscripts. And to my knowledge, we're right now the only people who have permission to use images of that manuscript and publish that manuscript. So we're very fortunate for that. And so we started cranking away on this manuscript, and we started to find things. And that's why we chose this manuscript, this particular grouping. We started finding things that was basically unlike anything that had ever been found. I mean, it was truly a game changer, the things that were in this manuscript.
Which books are in this manuscript, or just one, or multiple? Or
No, that's a very good question. So the manuscript collection, we call it the Cochin collection, or the Cochin Cambridge collection. And Cochin is a place in India. It's a town in India. It's a port town in India. Cambridge is the university in London. And these manuscripts, they contain the whole New Testament. So from Matthew to Revelation. And it's all in Hebrew.
No extra books, and it's all in Hebrew? It's all the same books we have in ours?
Yeah, that's correct.
Wow.
From Matthew to Revelation, we don't have any extra ones. There probably was a lot of other manuscripts floating around in that area, but there's a whole history on the manuscripts. As we know that Thomas made his way out to India, and
Wait, how do we know that? And can you tell us a little about how we know that, I guess?
Yeah, it's recorded in history that Thomas went out to India, and he unfortunately lost his life in India. That's where Thomas ended his ministry, sadly. But we kind of track the disciples, and we have an understanding of where they traveled to, what communities they went to. And Thomas made his way out to India, according to a lot of other scholars out there, a lot of historians and some historical records. But what it appears is the Messianics are the ones that formed this community in Cochin, India. And that these Messianics went from Pella, so they left Jerusalem, Israel, they all fled to Pella or Jordan. And then from Jordan, they went down to Yemen, and from Yemen, they hopped on ships. Those ships then ended up in India on the port town called Cochin, and today they refer to it as Kochi. So these Messianics flow into India, and they form two different communities in India. There's a community more north of them, and then a community that stayed in Cochin, India. And we don't know what Thomas brought to them, but we suspect he brought Matthew and maybe he brought some other ones. But we're not sure how the other ones got there, the other manuscripts, like John's writing and the Book of Revelation, which is called the Scroll of Mysteries in our collection, which I thought was kind of intriguing. But some time goes by with those two communities, and they're both Messianic, but the one that was more north of them turned into just straight Judaism. And then a long time went by where the Messianic community in Cochin split. They became one, just a smaller group of Jews who just practiced Judaism, and then the other group split and became Christians, and there's still a Christian community, and there's still a section of that town called Jewtown in Cochin, and they're known as the Black Jews. But some history on the manuscripts. So in or around 700 AD, there was a man named Claudius Buchanan, and he was a very wealthy merchant man, and he was going around looking for manuscripts, and he ended up in Cochin, India, looking for a Hebrew manuscript of the New Testament. And he came across he got a tip at one of the synagogues that a guy had a collection, and that guy, his name was Ezekiel Rahabi. And Rahabi is a name that links him back to Yemen. So we think that this guy might have came from Yemen, or his ancestral roots are from Yemen. But he was in possession of a collection of New Testament Hebrew manuscripts. And Claudius Buchanan wanted a copy of it. So he commissioned this guy named Ezekiel Rahabi to create a copy for him for his private collection. So he paid this guy, and Ezekiel Rahabi, it appears that he hired two scribes. And he might have done some writing too, but he definitely hired two different scribes. We see three different handwritings in this collection. And they made copies for him. And what we see is he in the collection, there was a manuscript alongside of it we call it Gaster. It's a different type of manuscript. It's in block lettering. And it was given to the Cambridge University together as a package, like they went together with the Cochin manuscripts. And it was just assumed that they were both exact same copies. So people thought that was going to be maybe something that Buchanan was wanting as block lettering, so it's easier to read. But it appears that they're not the same. They're not copies. They're just similar, but they diverge in so many places that the Gaster is not the same as a copy from the Cochin collection. But go ahead. Sorry.
Question about that. So the block lettering is just, the other one is kind of like a cursive, or just you could tell it's handwritten or something?
Yeah. So if you open up a Hebrew like Leningrad or Aleppo Codex, Leningrad is what people use today as their Hebrew text. If you go to a synagogue, they roll out the scroll, it'll be the Leningrad. And that's in block lettering. That's the typical block lettering. That's kind of what you see up here. It's the block lettering above me. Yeah, it's pretty easy to read and make out the letters. But yeah, this Cochin collection, most of it is in a cursive medieval style. So kind of the time period of how they were writing. But yeah, so so this collection, it was being commissioned to make a copy, and Buchanan took his copy back to Europe, back to England, and it eventually flowed into the library there at Cambridge. And that particular grouping of manuscripts, the Cochin specifically, had what they called Aramaisms. So it had Hebrew words, and then at the very end it would have like these tag-along letters of Hebrew, but it's technically an Aramaic, like pieced on piece. So there's like vibes and phrases of Aramaic mixed in. We call them Aramaisms. And the scholars they looked at it briefly. It wasn't digitized or nothing. So this is a long time ago. When these manuscripts came in, they looked at it and they said, there's some Aramaic stuff in here. It must be coming from the Peshitta. The Peshitta is the Aramaic New Testament. So the scholars didn't really do a good job checking. They just kind of looked at it, dismissed it, because they had no concept that the New Testament could have been written in Hebrew. And we know that the Aramaic is from Greek. So when they just dismiss it and say it's from the Aramaic, the Peshitta, nobody decided to check ever again. It just kind of got stuck on a shelf and ignored and collected dust, kind of like my Bible. It just collected dust. And actually, that's turned out to be a blessing for our project, that nobody was actually analyzing it or looking at it, except for one guy. There was one guy named Joseph Gephardt. He looked at the Matthew and found some amazing things in it. But yeah, so nobody was analyzing it until we started digging into it and finding out that these things that are called Aramaisms are actually from the 1st century. They're not something late. This is something that was being used in the 1st century, and around 90 AD, boom, those were stopped being used. So whoever was copying it was being true to the text and including those 1st century words, even though he probably didn't even know that those were from the 1st century.
How did you discover that bit of the story?
The 1st century Aramaisms?
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, I'm working with the team here, but like I said, Joseph Gephardt was the guy who started that ball rolling on studying Matthew, and he identified Aramaisms, and so we kind of piggybacked on his scholarly research, and then we unlocked vocab from that time period of those Aramaisms and stuff like that. And you have to learn Aramaic as a part of that, but we also, including those 1st century Aramaisms, we started finding Mishnaic Hebrew. So that would be Hebrew that you would see in the 1st century. A lot of scholars out there. Yeah, go ahead,
sorry.
sorry.
Writing in Mishnah.
So
Is that
yeah,
what that means? Okay.
so yeah, the Mishnah is recorded somewhere around 200-ish, but it details things that were being said prior to that. So the Mishnah is 1st century language, but orally passed down, and eventually somebody wrote it down, which is what you get in 200.
Got it.
So if you're looking for evidence of 1st century, and in Hebrew for New Testament manuscripts, you need to find Mishnaic Hebrew. If you find like medieval Hebrew or modern Hebrew in a manuscript, that's a dead giveaway that it's either been updated or it's been made into a translation from another language like Greek or Aramaic. So for us finding those, we were like super excited and like, wow, this is what we're looking for.
So okay, let me get it. Let me see if I'm keeping along. If I'm keeping up. The guys that first looked at this and just dropped it, they thought maybe because of the fact that it was written with the medieval script, they thought this is a copy into Hebrew of the Greek. And then you looked closer at those Aramaisms that they were calling and realized that those kind of words or writings or whatever you want to say are what they were using in the 1st century, similar to how they are writing the Mishnah.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the crazy part. So we started we started with Revelation because that was really exciting. It looked a little different than all the other collection, and it had the Scroll of Mysteries as the title. So we started translating it, and we were like, okay, well, the scholar said it's from the Peshitta. Let's see if that's true. So you can even see on our interlinears that we put out on our website. By the way, everything that we do, we put it out for free. So you can go to our website at projecttruthministries.org. You can download a copy of the translation of the Scroll of Mysteries, Revelation in Hebrew, or Matthew, or we have a James. We put it out for free, but you can see on literally every page we contain the Peshitta, the Aramaic, right next to our translation. And we have the English there too, for like, I think we use the Scriptures 2009, so you can see the English translation, which comes from the Greek. And we have a table there with a breakdown of word for word. So literally every page of our translation contains the Aramaic right there, so that you can compare visually to what's in our manuscript. And we started to see so many divergence from the Peshitta, the Aramaic. They were like, okay, the scholars are wrong. They are wrong. They said it was from Aramaic. It's not from Aramaic. There's so much evidence to say it's not from the Aramaic. So if they're wrong about that, we need to analyze this manuscript and do some serious study and put out a translation and get the ball rolling of, hey, here's the whole manuscript translated, and we're gonna keep going, book by book, but we're gonna give it out to the world, and we're gonna try to drum up some of these scholars to come look at it and analyze it seriously, because their initial first stance was wrong. And then we're detailing all these first century markers and all this language, and then the content, even the grammar is the grammar that you would see from the first century. And one of the things also that going back to the Aramaisms is so important is the more north you move in Israel and the time of the first century, the more Aramaic people are going to know, the more Aramaic they're going to use. The more south you move, the less Aramaic, the more Hebrew, Greek they would use. Mostly Hebrew, but there would be Greek in there because they were oppressed. Maybe a little Latin too, but the close to the region of the Galilee, you should see this blending and mixing, which fits with these Aramaisms, because, more north, they're speaking Aramaic, and they have to do trade. If they're fishermen, they have to trade with people speaking Aramaic. And Aramaic is so close to Hebrew that there's this overlap. If you know Hebrew, you can understand Aramaic, and vice versa. So to find things that from the right region of the disciples in the first century, using Mishnaic terms from the right time period as well, and then the grammar is matching of the first century, that made it, in our minds, at least the book that we were working on, the book of Revelation, that this is a legit book. It's again a copy of a copy of a copy, but the scribes were true to the content and making a copy, but it's coming from original first century Hebrew source, and it has not been transferred into other languages like Greek and Aramaic.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Wow. And have you made any headway in getting some of these mainstream scholars to look at this too, to kind of just come alongside you guys and say, yeah, actually?
We actually have that ball rolling as well. There's a college up in Canada, I think it's called King's College. They have built like this, I think it's like a committee that are discussing and analyzing, and they're going to have somebody present on, the things that we're finding. We have some scholars that have contacted us. We've contacted them, and they have signed on to endorsing our translation. We're also asking more scholars out there if they want to endorse the translation. There are people who are using our manuscripts around the world. They're logging on to academia.edu and our website, and we can see them downloading our manuscripts. And so it's pretty exciting. We're basically just now getting things going, and it's really exciting because this manuscript does some truly amazing things. Again, it's not coming from Greek, it's not coming from Aramaic, but it fixes a lot of these places in the Greek. Like there's places where it seems to be contradictions in the Greek. If you understand the Old Testament and you believe it still applies, you're like, why is Yeshua, saying not to swear at all when the Old Testament says that you can swear? In fact, you should swear using God's holy name, and Yeshua appears to be saying that they're swearing incorrectly swearing by the land, the sea, the heavens, the throne of God, but not actually using his name, and they're swearing falsely. So there's like contradictions like that. And when we look in the Cochin collection, it doesn't contain that part where it says swear at all. It's saying don't swear falsely. So that's one of those spots where it's kind of fixing the Greek, because the Greek kind of has a contradiction there, which is really cool. And then there's other places in the Greek that are suspected inserts. There's suspected things that we know they pop in later in history. Either there's a Roman Catholic doctrine that's working its way in, and there's modifications to the text. Not in a large scale, on a micro scale, but those little places are important. People who study text criticism, they understand these locations, and they have suspicions on others. But when we look at our Cochin collection, we don't see those. They're missing. So the content itself is giving itself away for the time period that it's coming from.
I'm curious, what are some examples? I know this is definitely going to be can of worms here.
Yeah.
No, maybe not, but just people will have opinions. But what are some of them?
I'll give you a few. So one of them is in Revelation chapter 1. There is it says John was in the Spirit on the Lord's Day. And the concept of the Lord's Day is actually a dated term. We can date that. We know when that pops up in history. It's kind of, I think, don't quote me on the actual year, but somewhere around the mid 300s AD, you start to get this concept of the Lord's Day. And it's kind of backed by the Roman Catholic Church as a way to replace the Sabbath. So like the Messianics, for a long time, the believers in Yeshua were keeping the Sabbath, but we have to move that. We have to shift it away from the Sabbath. So we'll create this thing called the Lord's Day, and we'll make it Sunday. So we know that is a created ideology, a doctrine that has worked its way into the text, and you can see it in Revelation. And so the Lord's Day is not Sunday. It says Yeshua is the Lord of the Sabbath. So if you're going to call the Lord's Day, you should be calling it the Sabbath, but that's not what they did. They created a new day for Sunday, with the idea that Yeshua rose on Sunday. So going into it, you should suspect, okay, well, if this manuscript is coming from an older source and it's not coming from Greek and it's not coming from Aramaic, then we should not see you shouldn't see the term the Lord's Day in the text. So we flip to it, and lo and behold, it's not there. It's missing.
Is there anything there?
Yeah, it's there. What it says is John was in the Spirit. It doesn't say on the Lord's Day. So we have these cool little things that confirm what we suspected. And it points back to it being an old, original 1st century source. Because that term had not been created.
Whoa! That's crazy, Bryan.
Isn't it?
I mean, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Another one, I'll give you another one from the same manuscript from Revelation. As you see in the text, it says the Alpha and Omega. I'm the beginning and the end, the first and the last, the Alpha and Omega. So just looking at the Greek, it says Alpha and Omega. That is a Greek letter, the first letter and the last letter. It's basically delivering the message that first and last, or beginning of the end. So technically it's redundant. In the Greek, it's redundant. It's 3 times you're saying similar things. The thing is in the Old Testament, in Isaiah, it says that he is the first and last and the beginning of the end. It doesn't do like a Hebrew thing where it says the Aleph and the Tav, which those are Hebrew letters, the first letter and the last letter of the alphabet. So we don't have that in this Isaiah. So when we get to Revelation, we see the Alpha and Omega in there. We're like, okay, well, that's Greek. Could that be an insert? And then you look at the Aramaic, and they say the same thing. They do Alpha and Omega. which basically tells us that the Aramaic is coming from the Greek. Why would you put Greek letters in your Aramaic? So that gives itself away. And
So
then
in
when
the
we,
Hebrew,
yeah,
in the Hebrew, it's doesn't have Aleph Tav, and in the Aramaic, it has the Alpha Omega.
right. In the Isaiah, it says the beginning and the end, the first and the last. So like beginning and the end is like a time, and first and last is like quantity. So it makes sense that you would say time and quantity there, from a Hebraic standpoint. But in the Greek, when they're using the Alpha and Omega, if you analyze it correctly with both the Byzantine and the Alexandria, they're not consistent. They use it, but then in certain places where they should use it, they don't use it. And then they pick back up at the end in like chapter 22, they use it again. So in the Greek, it's not being consistent using the term Alpha and Omega. So that tells me like it's probably an insert from the Greek. It's being redundant because the reader who's Greek doesn't understand Isaiah, so he's not going to understand what is being referenced here. So they have to put in the Alpha and Omega. So what does the Cochin say? We go to every single one of those verses where the Greek says the Alpha and Omega, and the verses that it should have used Alpha and Omega and didn't use it. And what do we find? The Alpha and Omega does not show up in any location in the Book of Revelation, Scroll of Mysteries from Cochin, India. It's missing. So it confirms what we suspected as a Greek insert. And this manuscript stands alone. And matches to the Tanakh perfectly.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. It's crazy, though.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's cool and crazy.
Yeah. So we keep, and here's another one, just to inform the listeners. If you read your English, or I don't know what language you're reading in, and maybe you're reading in Spanish or something, but if you see explanations in the text, those aren't natural. So if you're writing a story, you don't need to explain concepts if you know the people reading are going to understand it. So in the Greek, you have explanations. An example of this is when Yeshua is on the cross, he's dying, and he says, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, and then it goes into explaining, that is, my God, why have you forsaken me? It's coming from Psalms. So that's an explanation. That's a scribal explanation. So if a scribe is writing and he knows his audience does not know what that means, even though he's quoting it word for word, he then has to explain it. That is, here's what it means. So that tells you that there's been a change in language, because there's a changeover. I need to deliver the information. And some of those explanations aren't bad, but they give themselves away as a translation jump. And the Greek has a lot of
sometimes
those.
he'll say, yes, I remember some things like in the Hebrew tongue or something like that. I can't remember the reference to that, but
yeah. So that tells you there's been a jump in language, because now the scribe has to convey the message, and he's explaining it. So what does the Cochin say? It doesn't have the explanations, like what we see in Matthew 27. It doesn't say, my God, that is, my God, why have you forsaken me? It just goes on like you should know it.
because the implication here is that people are reading it in Hebrew. It was originally written in Hebrew. He's speaking Hebrew.
Yeah, he's
or
speaking
Aramaic.
Hebrew from the cross, and he's quoting Psalms, and they know he's quoting Psalms. You don't need to explain it. I know what verse he's quoting from. So it fits with the time period, and that it didn't jump from another language.
I'm curious about the parenthetical in Mark 7, where he says, thus he declares all food clean. I mean, this just, I'd be curious what it would say there.
I'm willing to bet that doesn't say that in the Kochi. We haven't gotten to Mark, but there's some things that, you start to see enough of these, you can kind of predict. And I've gotten pretty good with that. Like, hey, it should be this here, and then you go find it, and it's like, wow, the Cochin makes so much sense, and is so much more clearer, and doesn't have these issues. So
How far have you guys gotten at this point?
right now, we've translated all of Revelation. We've translated all of James. The James in the Cochin collection has an issue at the end. Seems like the last chapter halfway through. I don't know if it got destroyed, but there's a change in language and words being used, and it looks like they updated it from Greek. So we don't fully promote that one all that much because there's some modification, but it's still a good one that we have on our site. And then we've translated Matthew, and we've gotten up to 22, I think it is. But we're going to crank out the rest of Matthew probably within the next month or so. But yeah, and then we're going to move on to, we're not sure if we want to go to Romans or if we want to go to Luke. But we feel like we can get a lot of answers out of Romans. I know there's a lot of people that are curious as to what Romans say. So yeah, we're finding all these cool things that kind of cleans up the text and makes so much more sense. And the Greek is very flat. And I heard someone once say this in text criticism, working in this very space, is that looking at the Greek is like taking a photo of a painting. And then working in the Hebrew is like being up close to the painting and you can see the brush strokes. And that's such a good description because the Greek is very flat and the Hebrew is so deep and it brings out so much more information.
Man, the implications of this are large.
Yeah.
Maybe for better and worse. And I'm sure that people have a lot of thoughts about this as well.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So
we get pushback from people who say that the manuscripts were always Greek, never were in any other languages, despite historical records of early church fathers saying specifically Matthew wrote his gospel in Hebrew, and that's the original source. We even have early church fathers referencing verses from Hebrew manuscripts that are different from what people find in the Greek. And then there's communities that are mentioned throughout the land that are Hebrew only, Messianic Nazarenes. So we know that they were using those things, and we get pushed back. But the thing is we have full confidence in the manuscript. Like, I don't need to defend it. I just translated it. We're putting it out to the world. The manuscript fights for itself. Just go check out the manuscript. Look at the translation. Look at our footnotes. Look at what we're pointing out and have at it. The scholars want to debate on it. Go debate on it. Here's the translation. Y'all have been ignoring it. That's the problem. Look at it. Check it out. Compare it. What we've proven is it's not from Greek and not from Aramaic. Now what are you going to say? Right? That's kind of where we're at. But we're very confident in the manuscript and what we're finding.
That's cool. It's cool that you're putting it out there so people can just decide from there, argue from there. One thought comes to my mind. I don't know a ton about all of this stuff, but in my own Bible study, sometimes like in the book of Hebrews and other places, I would go back to the verse in the Old Testament that's quoted, the Tanakh, and it's not like, let's say I'm reading King James usually, and so I read this verse, I go back to Psalms or whatever the writer of Hebrews quoting, and it's not the same words. And so then I thought, well, what is he quoting? And he's quoting the Septuagint. So he's quoting the Greek, and that happens almost every time I go back to a reference from the New Testament. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm glad. That's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked that. So, there's a book. I don't think I have it with me right here, but it's called Text Criticism, and it's by a guy named Emmanuel Tov. He's at the Hebrew University in Israel and Jerusalem, and he basically wrote the book on text criticism, and he does this comparison of Masoretic texts, pre-Masoretic, and Septuagint, and he's comparing things in Dead Sea Scrolls. A lot of comparison to the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I agree with his stance. And what he says is, while it appears that they're quoting from the Septuagint, especially places like the Isaiah scroll, that what's happening is not that he's quoting the Greek or the Septuagint. What he's doing is he's quoting from a source prior to the Septuagint that is an Isaiah Hebrew that the Septuagint grabbed from. And that when Yeshua is reading in the synagogue, you can see him reading from Isaiah. He's actually reading from the same source that the Septuagint got their Isaiah from. And so there's this manuscript that has been lost. And we can see, there's a lot of evidence to kind of parse through that. It's very long and tedious. I don't want to get into that, but yeah, it appears that these quotes are coming from a older source that the Septuagint got theirs from. And also, there's a little bit of this in there, that because it's Greek and the Septuagint is Greek, that there's overlap in Greek usage and Greek word usage. So there's a little bit of that also happening because you're using the same language. And that makes it appear even more greater. But the thing is it doesn't make any sense to say that Yeshua is standing in a synagogue in the 1st century reading from a Greek Torah scroll. It doesn't make any sense. He would have been
That's a good
quoting
point.
Hebrew, and he would have been reading Hebrew. His whole ministry, he's speaking Hebrew. There's a lot of things that go into pointing out that they were speaking Hebrew.
So what he's saying is that there's a lost Hebrew manuscript that is pre-Masoretic and pre-Septuagint. Septuagint basically got sounds like pretty close copy of, because it lines up pretty well when
Yeah.
our Greek New Testament is quoting Old Testament scripture.
Yeah.
So it looks like, all right, that's definitely Septuagint. But if Septuagint was being accurate from an older lost Hebrew manuscript that predates both Septuagint and Masoretic, then that would explain this and explain what Yeshua is quoting in the temple.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't think of that, really.
Yeah, that's okay.
It would make sense, though, because he's not speaking Greek in the temple.
Yeah, no way. No. There's so many things. Like, one of them is when he appears before Paul, he speaks to him in Hebrew Edi. What is that? That's Hebrew. So he's speaking to Paul in Hebrew. That's one. There's a bunch of other ones. I think I actually have a list. Do you mind if I just kind of go through this little list here?
Do it.
Yeah.
And while you're doing it, I have a question too.
Yeah.
This is just a pragmatic question. Did that guy, when he visited Cambridge, did he take a picture of every page?
He did.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
How long did this take the man?
Good question. That's a very good question. But yeah, his little thumbnail is very famous, in the photos. Yeah.
Wow, when you were telling us earlier, I didn't know it was the entire New Testament.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so here's a list kind of things kind of pointing to, they would have been speaking Hebrew. There are 40 authors of the Bible, and they spoke Hebrew or read in Hebrew. Some people argue over Luke. I think Luke, being called the physician, would have spoke Hebrew. He would have worked at the temple. Jesus spoke and taught the Torah, which was written in Hebrew, and he did this as early as 12 years old, recorded. So Yeshua quotes directly from the Torah and reads from the scroll of Isaiah, which would have been written in Hebrew. We kind of talked about that. All of his disciples spoke Hebrew, and they could read and understand the Torah and understand that Yeshua was quoting from it. Yeshua attended the synagogues on the Sabbath, which they would have been reading a Torah scroll, which would have been written in Hebrew. At his crucifixion, they put up a sign that had Greek, Latin, and Hebrew on the sign, so showing you that people were using Hebrew in that time. And Paul was a Pharisee and could read and speak in Hebrew. And then again, I mentioned earlier in Acts 26:14, Yeshua speaks Hebrew to Paul when he appears before him. And then we also have the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have the Bar Kokhba letters. We have coinage. We have archaeology, all pointing to Hebrew being used in the 1st century.
That's pretty cool to hear this kind of evidence being built. Okay, I have a probably noob question, Hebrew noob question, which would be Hebrew was at some point a dead language, right? And then it gets revived by some random guy. And is modern Hebrew the same as the old quote unquote dead Hebrew, or what's up with all of that? Can you tell us?
The term calling it a dead language is not accurate. From a high level, you could say that it was a dead language, but when you actually like go behind history, nobody stopped using Hebrew. There's some communities here and there that switched over, and they were conquered by the Muslims and stuff, so they started speaking. But if they had a Torah scroll, they maintained the language, and they were the Jewish people were put around the world, so God effectively spread the Torah and His word and His name around the world by spreading out the Jewish people. So there's no real dead language. What happens is, the temple fell and people left, but there was also people who stayed behind. There's always people in the land, and a lot of those people still continued to speak Hebrew. And what they did was, Gesenius, who's credited as the guy who resurrected the Hebrew language, he just went around and compared. And he connected up these different places and then wrote like documentation of what people were using and basically quote unquote pieced it back together, but it was still intact. And as long as they had Torah scrolls in synagogues, they were still using Hebrew and teaching Hebrew to younger people. It was still surviving. It was just very small in scale.
And that old quote unquote Hebrew is just the same as this modern Hebrew generally, or
no? My colleague Janice, she says Hebrew is not Hebrew, it's Hebrews. It's plural. There are multiple different overlayings and changes of the grammar and the lettering, and so Hebrew has changed and morphed over the years. Even modern Hebrew is very different from biblical Hebrew. So that's why it's so important to make sure you're looking for the right Hebrew when you're looking at these manuscripts. And it should jump out to you when you see Yiddish words or modern Hebrew mixed into your text. You should be like, oh, okay, there's a problem here. I should be seeing earlier Hebrew, 1st century Hebrew. And in the Cochin collection, that's what we find. We just find old Hebrew. We find 1st century, late Second Temple stuff. One in particular, I'll just give you an example. One is the words dot and din, which dot means law. It can mean Torah law, but it could also mean religious law. And then din means judgment. Well, those come from Esther. Esther is late Second Temple. It's Second Temple time period. And so for us to find in our Cochin collection them using those words in abundance, you're like, oh, okay, we got late Second Temple stuff, and it's coming from the Tanakh. So that's why it's so important to know the Hebrew that you're looking for is in the time period that you're looking for.
Wow. Oh, one more of these on the language itself. Do you or Janice have thoughts about this Paleo Hebrew? What is up with Paleo Hebrew? Is this just
Paleo Hebrew is effectively it's just a different font from a different time period. Really, it's a font change, and you have an earlier one called the Proto-Semitic, which means like around the time of Sinai, and we can find those kind of in Egypt. You can find those at Mount Sinai and the real Mount Sinai, You can find them as they flow up north, kind of into the promised land. But at a certain time period, instead of like drawing the arms and stuff, they switched to shorter marks because of the rock. You're scratching on rocks. You need to make it more easier to, instead of chiseling, you could do quick markings. So that's what paleo is, from the changeover of the style of making quick marks straight up and down. It's a font change, and then you switch into later block lettering and stuff like that, which I think they got from Babylon, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it's just kind of a flow of the way languages develop and change. The English language has changed a lot. The style of writing the letters have changed. That's kind of what they're doing, but the bones of it, the roots and stuff, are staying the same, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm just thinking, I mean, I had all of these questions about Hebrew because it's not my area of expertise, but I've heard this, when you come into this Torah observant way, you hear all sorts of stuff about, paleo and this and that. And so, well, now's my chance.
I would say be very careful with the information of people online just kind of saying stuff about paleo or Proto-Semitic. It's kind of I would say a Wild West, in a sense, of people just kind of saying stuff and hey, that sounded really good. And then you got to just check behind them and be like, okay, where did you get that from? What's your source of saying this about that letter? Things like that. Yeah. It's not all hashed out.
Thank you. I think that is a good caution across the board. Is important. It's so hard, though, on any little change to any bit of the canon always freaks everyone out, because they'll be like, well, can't Yah preserve his word? And this is what we have, and this is what we've had. We have had, and think about all these centuries before Bryan Scott Williams started translating the Cochin Hebrew. This is what people will immediately think.
Oh yes, I completely understand, and I don't advocate at all for throwing away the Greek.
Sure,
we wouldn't know anything if we didn't have the Greek. So what I say is put the Cochin next to the Greek and see what happens. See the clarity come through. Keep them both together. Both are precious, but look at it and see maybe there's some clarifications, because there's some spots where the Greek says things as kind of ambiguous and doesn't really make too much sense, but then you hop in the Hebrew and you're like, wow, I understand what the Greek is trying to say. They're doing a not so great job saying it, but you can read it that way. But the Cochin makes it completely clear. I'll give you one. Let me give you one.
Yeah.
So this doesn't come from the Cochin. This comes from another manuscript, which I really like. It's called the Shaprev. It's a Hebrew James. And this is one of those where mainstream Christianity will take it and twist it and use it for what they want to use. And it's a place where it says the royal law. You've probably heard this term. And Christians will be like, see, look, I'm not under God's law anymore. I'm under the royal law. That's Yeshua. And anything that he said has to do with what I need to do. So if he just says, love your neighbor, that's all I need to do. I don't need to do any other parts of the law. I've actually heard people say that. But what this Hebrew James says is it doesn't say royal law. It says the king's Torah. Now, what is the king's Torah? That comes from Deuteronomy, with the commandment that every king is supposed to personally make a copy of the Torah. So it's still the Torah. It goes back to the Torah. And so you can see how the Greek is trying to say the same thing, but they don't know exactly what they're talking about. So royal law is the same as saying king's Torah, but king's Torah makes it specific. It's talking about the Torah.
Very interesting.
So now the Christians have no wiggle room there. They can't say, "Oh, it's the royal law. That's just what Jesus said," even though Jesus said he was talking about the Torah.
It's interesting because even just jumping language from Hebrew to Greek can open up strange arguments like, well, what law are we talking about here? But if everything's in Hebrew, you could see when it actually is Torah. And Torah, it would be the same word in the
Right?
front of the book and the back of the book.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, Romans would be a fun one. I'm
Yeah.
curious what you. I'm excited to follow your journey, man.
Yeah, thank you. Can I share? This is another thing that's kind of not yet public, something new we're working on. This is going to take us to the next level. We have a partner who has came onto our team. His name's Justin. Shout out to Justin Leone. But he brings this data analysis angle for the manuscripts that we're working on. Once we get a translation, we get an interlinear, he can use his software to kind of do comparisons. So we can compare to other Hebrew New Testament manuscripts out there, which we're doing, to validate like ours is unique, ours is special, these other ones are coming from other languages. And then we're also comparing to the Masoretic text, we're comparing to the Septuagint, and we're comparing to other Greek manuscripts like the Alexandrian and the Byzantine. So we're doing all this data analysis, and I don't want to give numbers or reports or anything like that because we're still kind of out on doing this process. Is something new that we're doing, but what we're seeing is a significant increase in matching to Old Testament verses, words, phrases, concepts, way more than the Greek. And some of that is due to it being the same language, but they're literally using the same concepts and phrases at such a higher rate than the Greek. And it's so significant. It shows you that this thing is coming from original 1st century Hebrew source, and that the Greek, once you change languages, you're going to lose things. And so we're seeing the evidence of the changing of the languages, basically validating what a lot of scholars throughout the years have said. It looks to be originally written in Hebrew, transferred into Greek, and flattened because the Greek is flattened. So you're losing a little bit. Each time you change languages, you lose. Doesn't matter what language, you can take it from Greek to English, modern English, and then you're going to lose concepts. You're going to lose information because not everything transfers.
For example, like the idiomatic expressions that you would have per language, you could lose things like that, I suppose.
Yeah, one of them is an eye of light. If you say an eye of light in Greek, it doesn't make sense. Having an eye of light in English, what are you talking about? But if you say an eye of light in Hebrew, even today in Israel, they still know what you're talking about. That has survived. That idiom has survived. And it means being generous. When you're stingy, you hold back, you squint your eyes. That's the eye of darkness. When you are generous, yes, I'll give you money. That is an eye of light. And so you're bright-eyed and open and giving. So it's an idiom that still exists. And we see it in the Greek. And what are they talking about? But if you transfer it back to Hebrew from the Greek, the idiom just pops. It makes complete sense and fits and lines up. He's talking about being generous there.
Even the presence of any of those idioms in any language, any translation would kind of be evidence that it began in someone thinking in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And their culture, the reference, they're talking about the Torah, all of it would have been surrounded in this Hebrew culture. And so you could see why the Greeks had to put explanations in there, because when it says like the Feast of the Jews or Passover, the Feast of the Jews and stuff like that in John, you're like, if you're writing to the audience who knows Yeshua and he's recording it and the disciples were with them, he doesn't need to explain that. They know what Passover is. They know what Sukkot is. They know these concepts. And it's evidence, again, that it was changed into another language for the reader's benefit.
Does this translation not say Feast of the Jews? Does it?
We haven't gotten into John yet, so I don't know, but I'm very hopeful. And this manuscript collection has passed so many tests. And listen, we're very honest we're very honest. You can see our work. We have a walkthrough study on verse by verse in Revelation. We have a bombshell series in Matthew. And when we come to things that are negatives, so this manuscript is not 100% perfect, but when we come to negatives and say it's like 100 positives and positive markers versus like we find one negative marker, we are completely honest and open, and we share that with our viewers on our channel. And we let everybody know, like, listen, it is what it is, but we found this negative marker here. And so, we explain it. And, when you make copies, things don't always get transferred over. Scribal mistakes happen. So that's throughout all the manuscripts around the world. People mess up. And people put footnotes in. Sometimes those footnotes migrate in. That happens, especially with the Greek. But yeah, so I just want to say, like, we're trying to do as honest of a job as we possibly can. And again, we're putting it out for free. So you can go to our website and download it.
That's so cool. Can you give us, I mean, on this topic, can you give us an example of a negative marker? Like how have you seen something like this? What's
Uh,
it appeared to be?
put me on the spot here.
I'm
I
sorry, only
didn't
if
have
one
any.
comes to mind. And if
Yeah,
it doesn't come to mind, people can check out your stuff.
yeah,
And
that's okay. One of them that comes to mind is there are places where the names of the like people being mentioned, like John or somebody like that. There are places where it changes into a different language, and so it's like referenced in, I don't know, Latin or another version. I can't remember offhand, but those changes, they could have been standardized by somebody per the request. So like maybe James Buchanan was like, hey, this is the term I use for these disciples. I want their names to be in this format. So that's one route. The other one is it could have been a study tool, and it could have been updated, as a study manuscript, which is kind of what a lot of people think. There are a bunch of different reasons that we could come up with why those name changes were modified, but they're not Hebrew. So that's just part of the manuscript collection, which I would consider as more of like a negative marker. But we kind of walk people through that and was like, hey, it is what it is.
that's cool. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say more about this research or what you're up to on? Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of like distracted us
uh,
with a bunch of different questions diving into this, but I know
this
you
has been
were.
fun. Yeah, I've enjoyed the questions. I always appreciate the questions. But yeah, there's this manuscript collection, the Cochin. I just advocate for people to check it out. Go look at it, compare it to the English, compare it to the Aramaic. We have that on the interlinears. And you'll see that there's some places in the text that really transform things and are always for the better. I find stuff and I'm like, wow, that's so amazing. That doesn't hurt the text. That doesn't hurt the message. Um, we go long periods where everything matches completely, and then you come to certain places where it's uniquely different. And those unique differences are very powerful, and they only help your walk. And one of those in particular, people will go to Matthew chapter 5, and we just put out a video on this. People will go to, I think it's 17 and 18. It talks about heaven and earth. And the Greek, it says, until heaven and earth pass away, not one jot or tittle. And I've actually heard people say, well, maybe that's happened at some point, but also when heaven and earth pass away, then the law will end. But to me, that doesn't really make sense because God's law is basically forever. It's the essence of who he is. It's all built on the law and love. And love is always going to be around because God's going to love us forever. And so what does the Cochin say? It says, although heaven and earth pass away. Not until. It says, although. Although heaven and earth pass away, not one jot or tittle. So there's no real wiggle room. Like it's going to always be there according to the Cochin and what the Cochin says. And I think that's beautiful. To me, that resonates a lot to the message. Like it's always going to be here. Yeah.
Wow. I'm curious, of course, have any of the differences been something that's been like, oh goodness, this changes my doctrine and this is heresy. I
I would say from a text standpoint, like what the Bible's saying, I would say not. But from a man's interpretation, a doctrinal thing, I would say, yeah, there's a lot of places, especially in Revelation. There's a lot of people that have all kinds of theories and all kinds of stances of this is how Revelation must be and how it's going to play out. First of all, you're talking about the future there. So nobody knows the future. So like we don't need to be so dogmatic anyways. But then when we come to these places, like people have created theologies based on certain phrases in the text. And when we look at it in the Hebrew, it's like, oh, that actually means something a little different. So in those types of scenarios, those doctrinal beliefs of, say, a denomination or something, those would be at risk when you look at the Cochin. But the text itself is not, there's no problems there, especially from a holistic standpoint. We're talking about minor changes or minor differences. And if I put a percentage on it, I'm talking, we're going to be finding like 5% differences, whereas like a lot of this is matching and the same.
Wow, man. Wow. It's very interesting. I'm be curious to watch your journey as you finish the whole thing.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited. I know my colleague Janice, the Hebrew grammarian, she's really excited about Luke and really excited about Romans. I think we can learn a lot from Acts as well. We kind of mentioned something from Acts earlier, but I'll just make this one point. This is really cool. So, he asked about differences. So, in the Book of Revelation, the Scroll of Mysteries, I've counted 45 major discoveries. They could be clarifications, could be changes, what have you, but there's 45 of them that are very unique. And then looking at the same book, I actually counted 42. I'm sorry, I got those numbers backwards. Sorry, it's 45, 42 major discoveries and 45 link ups to the Exodus story. So we're getting more pair ups to the Exodus story in the Hebrew than the Greek, which is really cool and exciting. Even word for word matches. So we're anticipating that in the other books where we're starting to see more pair ups to certain stories and stuff using the same words. But yeah, I mean, we're finding amazing things, and we just want the world to know about it. We want people to discover with us as we put it out. People are messaging us back and saying, "Hey, did you see this?" I'm like, "No, I missed it." I'm only human. I can only examine so much, and we're asking people to check it out.
Yeah, it's cool when you can quote unquote crowdsource the reading of it, and yeah, you get a lot of input when you put it out to the world and let them dig around.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, where can people find you? Tell us all of the locations
Yeah,
that
so
people can
we're
find you.
on YouTube at Project Truth Ministries. You can find us on academia.edu under Janice Baca. She puts out articles, scholarly articles there. The translations are also posted there. You can go to projecttruthministries.org. That's our website. We got a really cool website. And you can go download all of our translations with the interlinears. You can see the images of the manuscripts. Everything's there. We put out articles in one of the sections where you're just kind of recapping and pointing out really big, cool findings in the manuscripts per like certain chapters and stuff like that. We got Mount Sinai stuff on the website as also. And we work for free. We don't charge anything. But we have a donate section on the website. If people feel led to donate, that helps us out, pay off the website and cover costs of the website and anything that's related to our equipment and resource books and material that helps out. But again, we feel led to give this out for free. We're not charging anything. There is a physical copy of the Book of Revelation that is sold on Amazon if you want to buy that. The the profit cost is dropped to the lowest amount, and any profit that we receive from that goes straight to charity. So just know that we're doing this from a labor of love, and we want the world to see what's in these manuscripts, because I feel like it makes a big deal in understanding the text more, because it's solving some of these issues, especially known issues that we know is in the Greek.
That's really cool. Yeah, I that's very cool. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Would you like to add anything else at all about your research or about what you're looking forward to with this project, or anything at all?
I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to getting my mind blown some more. I mean, I feel like I'm in a daze with these manuscripts, because it's like I keep getting my mind blown. Like, oh wow, look at this word, look at this, and this is so huge that like you see so many of them, then they start to be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what it should be. That makes sense, and then you just move on. So yeah, I want everybody else to experience these mind blowing revelations in these manuscripts, and we're really excited for the world to see what's in it, because I feel like there could be a lot of growth in people's walk, a lot of help in text criticism, and passing the word along about what Yeshua is saying. And I don't know, we're just really excited for these manuscripts, and we want more people to see them, and we want scholarly people to get involved in analyzing them, because this manuscript collection has not had any real study, and we are basically the first ones doing this study. And yeah, we want the world to see it.
That's really cool. I have one more just personal question.
Sure.
Because I don't know this. On the name of Yah behind you and the white, which is the vowel that is left out in the
This one right here.
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. All right, so this actually comes from the Aleppo Codex, and the reason why I say that is because you can see how these are connected right here. These are actually hays, but that's the style marking of the Aleppo Codex. I get people say, "Oh, isn't that a chet or something else?" And I'm like, "No. It's just what it looks like in the manuscript." Hopefully, this isn't in reverse for the viewer, but yeah. So this is the shva, or some people would say shwa, and this is the cholam. This dot up here, cholam, and this is the kamatz. So this is an e sound. And it's an E like at the end of the. So you like the. So that's that E sound for shva. And then this is the cholam. This is the O sound. And this is the A, the kamatz. And so it's E, O, A. And what they would do is they would remove this one. They would remove the dot over top of it. So if you turn to a Hebrew manuscript like Leningrad or whatever, most of the time you'll see that this O is missing. But even in the Leningrad, I think there's like 20 some times, they actually included the O. They messed up. Either the scribe messed up, he knew what he was writing and he puts the dot in there, but it's in there. And so like even in the Hebrew manuscripts or the Old Testament English that we use, it's coming from a manuscript that contains the missing vowel.
Wow. So were the other vowels in there in the rest of these manuscripts, or are all the vowels gone? Oh,
Yeah. These other ones are here. They just removed one, and the rabbis admitted it. So this is like a known thing. So we should know that like they agree. Yeah, we removed one. We don't want you saying it. In some cases, they'll remove all of them, but most of the time they just remove one.
Could you read it without that? And what would it sound like without that?
Yeah, you could. So if you learn Hebrew enough, you start to read without the vowels. You don't need, the vowels are real more like helpers for non-Hebrew speakers. So once you learn enough Hebrew, you don't need the vowels. You can just read it. And maybe you get like 90% right in your pronunciations, but you know what they're saying because of the roots and how the root words are built together and the prefixes and suffixes and stuff built onto those roots. But yeah, I would pronounce this Yehovah. And I think that's the way the name is pronounced. I've seen personally at least 50 manuscripts from the Old Testament that contain the missing vowel, either on one page or on every page. And we have in our collection New Testament manuscripts that contain the missing vowel as well.
Wow. And well, all right, last thing about that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Can you read it without the dot? Like, let's say you're just a robot pronouncing it without the dot. What would that
Well,
be like?
technically it would be impronounceable, but it would be,
Okay.
you would take the O sound away, and it would be yeva. It'd be yeva.
Okay.
So you take the
Okay.
O sound out.
That's so interesting.
yeah.
Every one of your realms of study is intriguing, and I know everyone in this movement wants to know these things. They're like, oh, and they
Yeah.
all have their own opinion about the name and everything. But
Sure.
I thank you for sharing all of your time
Yeah.
today and your research. It's nice to talk to you, man.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure as well. Really enjoyed coming on. Thanks for having me.